welcome back to video 2 of the Mandi's Makings channel. Today I am going to share with you this story behind Mandi's Makings, kind of the why behind what we do, and hopefully allow you to gain a little bit more just understanding of why this is all happening, where this all started, how this all came about. And so I'm gonna give you the background, give you all the details. So here we go. So Mandi's Makings, in 2008 I attended a women's conference, and at this conference they talked about trafficking. And while I was there, I thought, this is horrendous. I mean, you hear about it, it's just horrible. And the biggest thing though that I thought was, it's just too big for me to do anything about. And so I went there and just listened and kind of processed through. And over the next few years, 4 years, I'd gone back to the same conference. I had heard them talk more about trafficking. I had learned all that I could learn. I'd done all the research I could do. I could give you all the statistics you needed to know. I mean, I spent so much time researching and learning and connecting with organizations and finding out what people were doing and trying to partner with people, but still kind of unsure of what this all looked like for me. And then in 2012, I attended the same conference, except this time I went with my sister and my mom. And they were sharing about trafficking, and one of the things that they mentioned was that people were making gifts for survivors and mailing them in. And my mom and my sister both said, well, you could do that. You could make gifts for survivors and mail them in. And I thought, well, what am I going to make? Because what would I do? What would I send? And they both said, well, you could crochet. And I thought, I am not crocheting. That's not happening. And so the reason for that, like I mentioned in my last video, we talk about that now, is that when I was in high school, I learned how to crochet. And then later, a few years later, my aunt was diagnosed with cancer. And at the time, she and I lived about 9 hours away. And I wasn't close. It was very difficult. Not being able to be close to her, not being able to be part of that day in and day out walk that she was on, not being part of that with her was a struggle for me. And so one of the ways that I thought that I could maybe do something is to make her a blanket. I thought, well, wait a minute, I know how to crochet. I'll make her a blanket. I'll mail it to her. And then she can go to her doctor's appointments with it, or she could, like she can use it on her bed. She could take it with her to her chemo treatments. Whatever she was doing, she could have this blanket. And she would know that I'm there. 9 hours away or not, I'm always there. And so I started making this blanket. But she ended up passing away, and I had not finished it. And I never told her I was making it. I wanted it to be a surprise. And so when she passed away, I remember coming back home from the funeral and thinking, I'm never crocheting again. Never. I took the partially finished blanket and all the yarn and the hooks and all the supplies, and I threw them in a bin, and I put them in the garage. I put the top on the bin, and I was like, I'm never crocheting. Never. I'm never crocheting again. And so here we are in 2012, and my aunt passed away in 2003, so it's 9 years later, and I'm like, I don't crochet. I told my mom and my sister, I don't crochet. It's not happening. But my husband and I had been married a few years, and when we were packing up boxes and doing things in the garage, he had come across that box a few times. I still had it with that partially finished blanket and all the supplies. And he said to me one day, he said, you either have to finish this blanket or you have to get rid of it. And he said it in a way that was the kindest way. Like, it just upsets you so much when you open this box. Every single time you open it, you just get so emotional, and I hate to see you go through that. And so you should either finish it or get rid of it. And I'm like, nope, neither one is happening. So just shut the box and put the lid on it and put it back in the back of the garage. And during the course of this time, around when this was all happening, and we had gone to this conference with my mom and my sister, and I had that thought from my husband in the back of my mind, I had gone into work one day, and I was talking with a friend of mine, and she walked into my office, and she stood there, and she said, just stood right in front of me, she said, "Do you crochet?" I was like, no. No. And she said to me, "You should." And I'm like, okay. So I told her the whole story. Went through the whole thing with her. And I expected her response to be like, "Feel sorry for me. Oh, Amanda, I'm so sorry. I get why you'll never do that again." You know, you want her to say that. And instead she looked at me and she said, "Did you ever think that that blanket was never intended for your aunt in the first place? Maybe it was always intended for you." And I stepped back and I was like, no, I told you the story. It was always intended for her. And why would I ever make myself a blanket? Like, that just, to me, in my mind at the time was like, that's so selfish. Why would I spend time making a blanket for myself? But she said, but when you finish the blanket now and you use it, wouldn't you think of her every single time you were? And I thought, okay, she's got something here. And that was it. And that was the end of that conversation. But over the next couple of weeks, I thought about that. And I found myself pulling that bin out of the garage and bringing it into the house and sitting on my living room floor and finishing that blanket. And as I finished that blanket, a few things happened. One, I realized that I had worked through some of the emotions of losing my aunt, but I didn't realize that one of the emotions I hadn't worked through was anger. I was angry at the fact that she was gone. I was angry at the fact that I wasn't closer with all of the things that she had to go through. One of the things that I realized too was that I hadn't lost an aunt. I had lost someone who I felt like I had lost a piece of me. My aunt, when I was growing up, lived with my dad. And so she was kind of like my other mom. Everything I did growing up, she was there. Every big thing we went through, she was there. A lot of firsts, she would, like, I mean, as a kid, she was there from day one. She was always there. And whenever I was with my dad, I was with my aunt. And so everything, she was such a huge part of my life. And so losing her and walking through that, I didn't lose an aunt. I lost a mom. And I didn't realize it. I think I knew it. You know how you know things like, well, duh, that makes sense. But the emotional side of it I didn't get until I started working on the blanket again. And so as I worked through that blanket and I worked through those emotions, I realized I had closed down emotions that I didn't want to feel. Just like I shut the box up and shoved it in the back of that garage because I didn't want to deal with it. And so I worked through that blanket and I finished and I realized so many things that I didn't want to process, I guess. Isn't that funny how grief is? Like, there's things that you know you need to process but you don't want to. There's stages of grief that you go through that are not easier, but you just walk through some, and then some are more difficult. You go back and forth with some. And I think that was one of those things that I didn't want to process through. I didn't want to be an angry person. I didn't want to be angry. The biggest thing I realized was that I was angry. I was angry at God, and I was angry at myself for being angry at God. I was angry because I thought, how could you take her? Like, don't you get it? But I didn't realize that I felt that way until I got to the point where I was finishing the blanket. And so I finished the blanket. And now, even today, that blanket is in our living room. We use it every day. It's Nana's blanket. We grew up, my aunt, everybody in the family called her Nana. Everybody that knew her called her Nana. And so that's Nana's blanket. And anybody that comes over or uses that, my husband sometimes will say, hey, can you throw me Nana's blanket? It's hers. And so we use it all the time. And so I finished that blanket, and then in that same year, within the course of a few months, I ended up making my first box of gifts. They were hand-woven belts that I sent to survivors of trafficking. And the reason that I did those belts, made that first box and sent that first box, is because I realized that I wanted to give my aunt her blanket so she knew she wasn't alone. And when I use the blanket now, even to today, I think of her. I think about the good times we have. I think about growing up. I was never alone. And I know now, to today, even the people that are all around me that love me, I'm never alone. Even in times when I feel like I am, I'm not. And I want those kids to feel that way. When we started sending gifts, it was kind of just my thing. Oh, I'll send this gift. And I remember sending the first box on my lunch break one day. I had an hour lunch break. I went to mail the boxes. And I got in my car at the post office, and I immediately thought to myself, okay, I'm done. Because I learned about trafficking, and I wanted to do something about trafficking, and now I've done something, and so I'm done. It's kind of like I checked those boxes, and so I can move on to the next thing. And I just knew, like I had this gut feeling, like this is just the beginning. And that scared the daylights out of me. But I knew it. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't understand it at the time. And I just went on with my day, went back to work and kept going. But as time went on, I started realizing, wait, I want to send more stuff to survivors. And so I did. And more people would find out what I was doing. And I had more people who were donating money for shipping a box. The lady who convinced me to finish the blanket donated a huge carload full of yarn for the first couple of projects that we sent to get to the gifts to survivors. I had more people who were making gifts for survivors. I had people who wanted me to make stuff for them. I had a lady that I worked with at the time who wanted her daughter to have a tutu for her first birthday. She said, I'm going to pay somebody to make this. You might as well make it. I'll give the money to you. And then you can use the money to give more gifts to survivors. And so it's just grown from there. From that point until the beginning of last year, so 2012 to 2018, 6 years, we had so many people who were donating hats and scarves and jewelry and painted little pictures and so many things that we were giving away. We had given away 2,500 gifts to survivors as of the beginning of last year. And it was incredible. But we got to the point where I realized that some of the gifts we were giving to survivors, people, they would say, we're going to put this away, and if we have somebody we can give it to, we will. And I thought, that's not the way this is supposed to be. Like, we're supposed to be doing things. We need to build this more into a community of people who are making together. Not doing separate things coming from different places. Something we're collectively doing together. We're building a community together of things that these kids need. One of the statistics that stood out for me from day one was that there are 300,000 children at risk for being trafficked every year. And the average age of a child being trafficked is 12. And I was not okay with that. And so early last year when I was thinking about all these things, I realized to collectively do something, we need to do blankets. We need to give to kids in need. We need to reach kids that are at risk. We need to partner with organizations who are helping kids so that we can stop it before it starts. We can reach these kids right where they are. We know if we reach a family, we reach a child, we can reach a family. And so legacy blankets became a thing. And as I started thinking about it, I thought, if we do a blanket that consists of squares, people can make squares and they can mail squares in, and then the squares can be constructed into a blanket, and then we can build those blankets and put a border on it, and we can give those blankets away to kids. And so we started Legacy Blankets in April of last year, and through a Facebook group we built about 60 team members. We have 60 creators who are making squares in that group. And at the end of last year, we gave away 76 blankets last year from April to the end of the year, and it's incredible to see the community that's being built, the people who are coming alongside to make this happen. I mean, there's so many, even from day one, from the time that first box was mailed until today, I think about all the people who have made this possible, and I couldn't even begin to list them all. It's amazing to me. People who have donated yarn and donated gifts and donated money for shipping a box and prayed with us over boxes that were being mailed and reached out to let you know, like, I'm thinking of you guys because I know you're going out to do events we've done to raise awareness for trafficking. Groups I've been able to speak to, women's groups, community groups, church groups, just people we've been able to reach. It's been amazing. And so now here we are with a YouTube channel. Let me tell you, there are many things throughout this journey of Mandi's Makings that I have said that I would never do. I said in 2003, when my aunt passed away, that I would never crochet again. We all know how that's turned out. I said when this all started and started to grow, I was never going to do videos. I'm not speaking in front of people. I'm never going to stand up on a platform and talk to somebody. We know how that's turned out. So I just don't, okay, whatever you say, God. It's, here we are, YouTube channel and all. But I know we wouldn't have a YouTube channel if it weren't for Legacy Blankets, because this is going to be a great way for us to build that community that I know we're meant to build. If it weren't for Legacy Blankets, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be doing this together. We wouldn't have built a Facebook group of so many creators who are making squares. But if it weren't for Nana's blanket, we wouldn't be doing Legacy Blankets. And if it weren't for Nana, we wouldn't be here. I know if she were still here, she'd be making squares too. So I'm excited about this. Thank you so much for watching this. I wanted you guys to have the story of how we got to today, where we are. Over the next couple of videos, I am going to share with you. In the next video, we're going to do, I'm going to show you a few of the Legacy Blankets that we've been able to create so far for kids. I'll share with you some of the squares that some of the ladies have made. And then we'll talk about some of the organizations we've been able to partner with. And if you want to get involved in making squares, I'll share some more details about the squares, the sizes, the yarn, just some of that stuff. And then after that, we're going to do a series of videos where I will show you how to make a square. I'll show you how to construct squares into a blanket. And then I'll also show you how to do the border on a blanket, so that you can create a Legacy blanket, and hopefully you can get a community group together locally in your area, maybe to make a blanket for a child in need who is close by you. I've seen ladies who have gotten together who have made squares, and then they've worked together to construct the blanket, and then they've given the blanket to a child in their community, and it's just been so cool to see them build this community just around a Legacy blanket. And I always say, look, it's not about the blanket. It's not about the stuff we give to them. It's about the people that we connect with. It's the community we build to make the blankets, and it's the impact that we can make in the lives of the kids and the families that we reach. And I knew from day one that this was not about me, but this was a way for us to come together and do something to make an impact. People always will say to me, if they hear Mandi's Makings, they immediately think, well, that's because your name is Mandi and you're making stuff, and it's not. Mandi's Makings, the name, came from the idea that Mandi was what I was called as a child. When I was growing up, my family, close friends, all called me Mandi. And I want to reach kids. I want to reach children. And then Makings was always about making an impact. And so it was making an impact in the lives of kids. And there's Mandi's Makings was how it came about. It sounded ridiculous to me at first, but now I love it. It fits, it works, and so there's a little background on our name too, so you got the full story. So thank you so much for being here. Our next video, I will get to show you some of the legacy blankets and the squares, and we can talk a little bit more about those. And then hopefully you guys can start making some squares soon. So I will talk to you soon. Thanks so much for being here. Bye.